Welcome back to Dr. BeeWell. Today, my guest is a true OG. She is a true pioneer. She was the first woman fellow at the University of Florida for gastroenterology. She's published, 150 studies. She's been in clinical research for multiple decades. She started her own private practice. She has started her own company. She is the microbiome queen, the C. diff queen. She wears on her badge "Guts to Treat" because that's exactly what she is. She has the guts to treat. She was integral during the COVID pandemic. She's a mom. She's a no drama person. I'm excited to have on my show today my guest, Dr. Sabine Hazan. How you doing,
Thank
How you doing, Dr. Hazan?
Great, and thank you for having me. And that was perfect. No drama person. That's totally me. But somehow I seem to attract drama, so I don't know.
Well, you want to know what? I think it's pretty funny because I that's how I like when I came across you. I was just like, you see a lot of people who are constantly stressed out, and they're because their work, their life is on the line, and they're stressed about it. They're trying to put it forward. But I would listen to you, and you would just be like, "Oh no, like we just need to have no drama about this." Like the FDA is pulling my papers. They're not letting me do my job. They're not letting me treat my patients. But it's okay, no drama.
Yeah, I mean, the FDA, first of all, hasn't stopped me from treating my patients, so for correction. But it's not the FDA, unfortunately, that's retracting my papers. It's investors they're not happy about the price of their stock dropping because of my papers. That's the reality. And that's the reality we're living in right now, where basically it's a different type of insider trading, if you ask me. Something is contradictory to their company, and so they will attack that paper because it doesn't promote their product, right? So, but this is science, right? I mean, if it's too hot in the kitchen, get out of the kitchen. If you don't like the fact that your stock is dropping because the research you did is poor, then don't invest in research. Go invest in real estate. Go invest in the new Bitcoin. Go invest in, leave healthcare alone and leave science alone, because at some point we're all going to be patients and we cannot interfere with research. So yeah, drama seems to come my way. Like right now we're speaking and there's a fire, like in Fillmore and Santa Paula. So what are you going to do? You know what I mean? It's like, yes, you could be a victim. Yes, you could say, oh my God, there's a fire, I can't be on this podcast. Or you could just say, there's a fire. I have a generator in my office. I'm in, building that has, bricks, and I should be fine. What am I going to do? I'm not going to run. I didn't run from COVID. I'm not going to run away from a fire. So life is that way, right? It comes at you with multiple fires, and you learn how to calm down and navigate through the fire and hose down the fire, and you learn which hose is the best. And that's how it is. Being excited and dramatic, it's not really going to help me, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree there. I've had to learn that, in my life as too. I was, I'm an emotional type of guy, and I sometimes would lead with my emotion. And I've learned that that's not always the first move or the best move, and just to kind of breathe and just take it in and hey, what's really happening here. And I'm your family and everyone is doing okay from the fires, and you guys are
Yeah,
safe, or
see, my parents, I moved them to Florida, but then they're coming back today. So I'm like, oh my God, and it's still not over. And my kids are fine. So we're fine so far. So many of my friends lost their houses. It's insane. So many. I was just talking to one of the top neurologists in the country, in my opinion, and he just lost his house, and he's an incredible artist. So I can just imagine
uh,
the beautiful paintings he had on his walls and all this art that you cannot reproduce, so
priceless stuff,
priceless stuff, and I look at my house, and I packed up the stuff that I really wanted, but I packed them in my and put them in my office. Now I'm like, there's fire around my office. What am I gonna put them in my car and just be the wandering person with my stuff? So it gets hard. And the other thing is, people have died, from these fires. So it's really hard. It's really sad.
Yeah, people have died, and the amount of the destruction that we've seen over here. It's funny. There's a lot of us in the Northeast and across the country right now are complaining that it's really cold. We're dealing with like -10, -15 degree weather, and at nighttime, and everyone's like, oh, it's so cold, and it's like it's something that we deal with every year. We know how to deal with it, and I feel very grateful that that's not something that we do have wildfires up here and stuff, but not like you guys, and not to the point where it's destroying, thousands and thousands of tens of thousands of acreage of land, and, sweeping up people's homes. And so I'm glad that you are safe. And I just, I pray for everybody who lost their home and lost their life. And hopefully we can heal from this and get some better governance.
And you know what's amazing as you talk about what's going on in the East, right? I know that in New Orleans there was snow. And you almost have to like step back and look at this and go, wow, there's fires on the West Coast and there's snow on the East Coast and it's freezing. Is that the planet trying to adjust the temperature, right? So,
Yeah.
because when you look at icebergs, for example, right, everybody's like, oh, the icebergs are melting. But when you look at the icebergs in Alaska, they're melting. But then you look at the icebergs in Argentina, they're growing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So does the microbiome of the planet act a certain way to kind of say, hey, wait a minute, it's too hot on this side. Let's freeze it on this side, right? The core of the planet, the core microbes that are in the depth of the planet that we haven't even looked at, right? So I just think that's how my brain works anyways. It's always like questioning, asking questions and saying, I wonder if the climate is from this side because it's adjusting, right?
Yeah, and I think we share that, in that I've heard interviews where you've said since you were a young girl, 4 years old, 5 years old, like why are we on this earth? Why are we here? Like let's figure this out. And I think that's a great way to look at it, because it is all bacteria, viruses, and fungi, right? That's what this is all we're all made up of. And so yeah, there's something that's happening deep on this planet that we have no idea about. And people talk about that a lot, with I mean, a lot of times they're referencing like magnetism and the pole shifts and stuff like that. But I think that would only happen if the microbiome of the earth was causing it to, or was allowing it to,
I think so.
facilitating it.
I think we think that we're in control, right? We think we can, change the weather. We think we can change a human being, but really, are we in control or are the microbes in control, right? Think about COVID. COVID kind of created the super bug, right? Think about C. diff. You were talking about Queen of C. diff, right? C. diff became a super bug. Staph aureus became a super bug. So you look at these microbes and you go, I think they're in charge. And here's the crazy thing for me, anyways, is they don't really die. Like you look at C. diff, you try to kill it, but then at the end, the only way to suppress it, all you can do is really suppress it. You can't really kill it. You should not kill it because it's part of a group of microbes that allows something to be done in the human body, right? So I think that's the fascinating thing. I think it's why are we not trying to understand why microbes are continuing, right? You think of something like E. coli, right? And other viruses and other microbes that they don't just disappear. They're still around, but they're just suppressed, right? So I think that's the fascinating thing is what makes them do that, right? What allows that continuation?
Yeah, and what allows them to be like, for us to respond to them in safe ways when they're at certain levels, and not even in safe ways, when they can be beneficial for us. And now, is this some of the stuff this is some of the stuff that you're finding out, right? Like I know that there's so much to explore, and that everyone's microbiome is so different.
Yes, so much. But what we are realizing is there is such a thing as a resilient microbiome. In other words, someone may have been born with a certain amount of microbes that to another person might be toxic, but to that person, because it was passed on from generations to generation, it probably made that person resilient, right? And resilience is what we want to understand better, because really listen, imagine the beautiful thing about stepping into a room with a patient with TB and not catching tuberculosis, right? What is it about the person that steps into a room with a patient coughing and having active TB that allows that person not to catch TB, right? Not from protection from a vaccine, but innate protection that the person developed themselves. Same thing with like, you hear of people going hiking, you know, especially in Malibu. There's a lot of hikers, right? And some people will develop ticks and Lyme disease, right? They'll get bitten by a tick and get Lyme disease. And some of them will not, right? Why is that? What makes one person resilient and not able to catch, you know, Lyme disease versus another one who is catching it?
Well, I think that's what the beautiful thing that you're doing is that, you know, you know, I'm a trained pharmacist. And so like, I have a doctor in pharmacy. And so like when I went to school, you know, we were taught about the immune system and that some people had, you know, better immune systems. And that's why, you know, they could go into into a room with somebody with tuberculosis and be okay. It was never taken the next step further. And I kind of wondered this stuff. It's like, okay, I understand what runs the immune system and we need to keep healthy, but there's no way to actually, you know, to verify this. You know, there's no way to actually look at this, what's causing this. And it
Right.
probably, it most 100% is the microbiome. But we haven't gotten to the point yet where we have we gotten to the point where we definitively say that now? That stuff is, that the immune system is directly correlated by the microbiome?
I mean, I think, you know, you could say it, but then there's going to be a lot of people that are going to doubt it out there. I'm definitely going to say it. I'm going to say,
Yeah.
you know, the microbiome is really what is in your gut, and that's what dictates your immunity. We certainly saw it with COVID, right? The people that were exposed to COVID never got COVID, and the people that had COVID had a loss of a certain microbes that the people that were exposed to COVID didn't lack, right? So
Hmm.
bifidobacteria was that microbe. And bifidobacteria is that microbe that is found in probiotics, right? So it's when you turn the bottle, you can see bifidobacteria in there. When you define probiotics is just a fancy name that's been trademarked, but you know, probiotics is bifidobacteria. It's the bacteria of bifidobacteria. That's what started all this, right? So when you look at the bifidobacteria level of people that were exposed to COVID and never got COVID, they were really high versus the people that had COVID. So that was the beginning for me, right? The beginning of saying, why am I exposed to a patient without wearing a mask? And why am I not catching COVID with that patient at the beginning of the pandemic, right? Why is Dr. X in the ER not wearing a mask, exposed to COVID and never got COVID? Because remember, at the beginning of the pandemic was the best time to do the research and collect the data because we didn't have masks. You know, like a mask was like $30. I wasn't going to
Hmm.
spend $30 every, you know, 10 minutes that I'm seeing a patient.
Yeah.
So I'm like, you know, you barely make $30 on these visits to begin with. So I'm like, I'm not spending $30 on a mask.
Right.
You know, I'm going to take my chances, right? So when you're exposed to patients and you know, at the beginning we were all covered, right? But then I treated my first patient who was COPD, CHF. He was one of my first 12 patients that I treated. You know, horrible comorbidities, diabetic, overweight, and he survived COVID. And I said, well, if this guy's surviving, I'm going to be fine. So then, you know, the idea of covering my face, putting a hazmat was gone. First of all, I couldn't even breathe in the hazmat. I'm like, I can't see patients. I'm uncomfortable. I can't focus. So what happened was we started slowly taking them off and being exposed. And then that's where you learn, right? You learn, like the girl that was analyzing the stools in my office, that was collecting all the stools with COVID. You know, she started off wearing a hazmat and then she took it off, and then pretty soon she's like not wearing a mask and
Hmm.
she's with her gloves and she's basically processing these samples, and she never got COVID. So what it was in her that allowed her, and how did she, what did she do to protect herself, right? That's where you learn, right? You learn from people that have been exposed and didn't catch the virus, right? So
Hmm.
that was the perfect timing to do the research, to collect the stools. And that's how we discovered the loss of bifidobacteria was really important during COVID. And then from there, we said, well, what increases the bifidobacteria, right? And then lo and behold, discovered vitamin C increases the
Hmm.
bifidobacteria. vitamin D increases bifidobacteria. We haven't published yet in vitamin D, but unfortunately, it's very, it's very depressing in a way to publish these papers, to spend thousands of dollars, like every paper is a minimum of $30,000 to publish, to get a
Hmm.
data analysis, to write the data, to collaborate with other doctors, to send those papers, to publish, to put the word out, to release it, etc. Right? So when that happens and you see the paper is being retracted for no good reason because a number is the wrong number on the paper, that could have been easily corrected, or it just doesn't fit the narrative, then you kind of like ask yourself what's going on there and why, papers that are retracted are basically papers that have been fraudulent, right? I didn't give hydroxychloroquine. I didn't give ivermectin. I didn't enroll patients with COVID. You know what I mean? That's fraudulent papers. Those should be retracted. But when the FDA is watching your trials and you have an IRB that's watching your trials and you have informed consent, and the FDA comes in and says, okay, well, Dr. Hazan, you didn't submit a form on time, fine, you get a fine, you get a reprimand, for example. But then they come back and they say, you know what, you're doing research the proper way, continue doing research, and they don't stop you from doing research, then there's something to that, right? And here's the thing: if the data and the papers were retracted and the data is not there, then maybe retract all the clinical trials I've done for pharma, right? Because you can't just be a good doctor on some papers and not a good doctors on others, right?
Right.
Maybe we should start thinking about removing some of those biologics that are in the market, maybe Harvoni, ivermectin. I was helping my sister with the
Yeah.
ivermectin when we did the clinical trials for scabies and lice, so, here's the thing: when things happen, you have to kind of start questioning, why is this happening? And then when you step back and you realize it's all about the price of a stock and how they're trying to change the narrative, it kind of is upsetting in a way.
Can we? Oh, it's very upsetting. It's very upsetting to me. As a person who literally just wants people to, to use science-backed research to be able to, to heal their bodies and to allow the practitioners who have spent their lives, learning, these practices and these disciplines to be able to do what they want to do. Now, can we go into any of the examples, like with some of these investors that are, these companies that are, is it like Paxlovid that are, like the COVID companies, and they just.
What we found out is that the company that was supporting, so I don't like to put people on stage, because I'm not here
No
to,
drama.
no drama. But the company that is the biggest criticizer of papers and that is allowing these papers to get retracted, and they go to the editors and they push for these papers to be retracted, is sponsored by a couple of foundations who support pharma. So complete conflict of interest. The other thing is the two people that have attacked my papers personally are people that own patents on the microbiome. So complete conflict of interest there too. They used to, so if you remember, there was a company called uBiome that was basically selling a lot of kits and then they went fraudulent.
Yes.
Now they said they didn't go fraudulent because the data was clean, but they got indicted because they triple billed Medicare. Okay.
Hmm.
But was the data clean? I mean, they had a normal control group. What's a normal control group in the microbiome? I mean, did they do the clinical trials to make sure that people were, normal? Did they look for chronic pancreatitis? 15% of people have chronic pancreatitis. We don't even know they have it. Did they look for reflux? People with reflux have a different microbiome than people without reflux. Did they look for, did they take a history of the patients, or did they just do a questionnaire? So remember, when you are doing a questionnaire, and by the way, we do clinical trials with these patients on the microbiome. Okay. So when we do a questionnaire, and inevitably you send the questionnaire, the patient doesn't reply on past medical history, right? You get the stool sample, you start meeting with the patient, and you see past medical history, nothing. And then you take the history and they go, oh my, I have MS, I have Parkinson's. Why wasn't that written in the questionnaire? Because it took a doctor to get that history from the patient, right?
Hmm.
Because when the patients are collecting their stools, they don't really have time to like be, they're just sending, they don't care about the cards, they just send it. So when you analyze a normal as a company and you didn't do the proper research to make sure that your normal does not have chronic pancreatitis, does not have scar tissue, you got to make sure they're on a certain diet, because remember, diet, vegetarian, vegan, carnivore, different microbiome. Also, the microbiome changes. How do you capture that microbiome that's non-changing, that gives you that validated result, right? Where you
Hmm.
could test your microbiome day in, day not, and the next day you don't change anything in your diet, and it's still you. It's still your signature microbiome, right? So those were the questions that I had at the beginning when I embarked on this myself, because I said, well, you know what? The idea, the concept of ubiome was good, but the research was not done. We need to do the research. And we cannot do the research with just the scientists. Think about who was behind ubiome. It was a bunch of PhDs. You
Hmm.
need to incorporate the physicians to basically say, okay, well, I've taken the history, I've done all that. You've got to get them into this, okay? But it has to be done at a clinical trial level. Here's the problem with the clinical trials on the microbiome. It's expensive. You've got to have a lot of numbers. You've got to have a lot of numbers. First of all, you've got to have an assay that's valid, verified, and reproducible. Okay, that's number one. The second thing is you've got to do your research methodically. You've got to make sure you took the history of the patient, whether the patient was drinking. The majority of patients will not tell you they're drinking. A lot of people actually have an alcohol disorder
Hmm.
and will not admit it to the patient, to the doctor.
Very, very
So
much so.
you really got to have that relationship. So, for example, in a world where they're trying to push AI out there, right? AI is not going to get the history from the patient, right?
It's gonna actually make it worse, right? Like it's gonna further create that disconnect that you're talking about. So I have some experience with ubiome. I helped take care of a gentleman in my town here locally who needs a little bit of help. He's intellectually disabled, and at some point his doctor had suggested that we do this and that we sign up for this, and he helped us set us up for it. And I remember just thinking, like, I'm a pharmacist, and so again, I still went through those same things where it was like, oh, do I need to put all this stuff? Like, they're just taking the stool. Aren't they going to be able to analyze everything from the stool? Like, why do I have to? They should be able to tell if he's chronic pancreatitis, if he, all this stuff. That should be able to be told by this, and that's what the patient thinks. So if you don't have that relationship, you're never going to get to the bones of it.
And here's the thing, how are you going to teach a program to recognize chronic pancreatitis, right? When we, the doctors, are not even there, right? So it's kind of like that whole big scam of Theranos, right? Where you could do a blood test and it tells you everything. Well, that's a big scam. It turned out to be a big Ponzi scheme, right?
Hmm.
But I
Yep.
mean, that woman was supported. I mean, made $90 million from sponsors. So was she used as just as a person that basically as an actress kind of thing to push that company? And but who made the money on that end, right? The investors, right? That sold the idea of a blood test without even testing or checking her laboratory to make sure that she had the right equipment, to make sure that she was doing the proper test. They just put the money in there, scammed the world to just believe that this was like the next best thing, and everybody just bought into it. And then people lost their shirts. But guess what? The initial investors didn't lose their shirts
No,
because they knew what they were doing.
of
So
course.
there is, it's a shame because when we do things like that, it's all great when you're the investor and you're making money. But unfortunately, at some point, you're going to be that patient. And how many venture capitalists do I see in my office that are coming begging me to give them stool transplant of a right donor? And I'm like, we're not there yet. The science is not there. Because if I give you, and remember, these guys are multimillionaires, right? Or billionaires. If I change the microbiomes to make them worse, then I'm liable, right? Because guess what? I didn't know that the stool sample that I gave them was from a bipolar, that made them bipolar or suicidal, because the donor who gets $500 by a pharmaceutical company to sell his poop is not telling me that he is suicidal. He just wants to make that $500, right? Not everybody has a conscience to say, oh, wait a minute, I'm suicidal. I should tell the lab that I'm suicidal, right? And the
Right.
labs, they're never going to know who's suicidal.
Even if it's familial, like, which is the best, right? From my understanding of doing your research, even if it's familial, like, hey, I can help my dad, I can help my sister by just doing this. And it just means that I don't also perceive these, I don't necessarily perceive this bipolar or this depression or this anxiety that I have. And then you put it on them.
But here's the thing. Familial was like an idea that I had, right? Like, what about using family members, right? Because that's what we did. Spouses, family members, as GI doctors on the front line of C. diff at the beginning, we were like, you know what? The wife is a good donor. She's healthy. She's lived with her husband. They, shared microbes. Why not use that? The problem with that is that's not a pharmaceutical product, right? But we were doing that for years as doctors before it became a pharmaceutical product, right? And it was working. I mean, it was working like 92% and 99% success with my C. diff patients.
And you're doing it less now. You're doing it less now because of the regulation.
You can't do it because here's the problem. To test the stools, to make sure that the stools are clean, you need 3 high tests, okay? And those tests, the labs do not test anymore. So Progenibiome, we are testing because I still have a lot of, high clients. I have like sheiks and politicians and everything. So, my clientele, celebrities. So my clientele, they want to know everything about the patient. They want to meet the patient. So I have to test. So I had to buy the machines to analyze the stools myself and test. But that's the population that I have. Not everybody has that population. And actually, it's kind of funny because it's the same population that invests in these stocks, right? So they come to, so it's kind of funny because I'm in both sides, right? On one hand, I'm the physician to these guys. And then on the other hand, I see them and I see the whole, politics of the stock market and keeping the economy going of a country, etc. So I get it. But at the end of the day, I think the stock market needs to lay off a little bit from science and also understand that if they're going to invest in science, they've got to keep it legit and they cannot interfere with the science.
That's the sentiment. That's the sentiment that I love right there. And take anything else from this episode, take that away, that eventually you will become the patient. You are going to become the patient, and it might not be you. It might be your loved one. It might be your kid. But like, we're all human beings and we're all going through this and we all live in this toxic soup together that we've created. So like, you're going to get sick and you're going to need the treatments. So why get in the way of that? Why not let people who are so passionate, who want to do this good work. And I know that there's so many of them, so many of my friends and colleagues who want to do this good work and put their nose down to the grind and just go and, and get after it. And they're not able to, they're hampered by regulation, by, like you're talking about, this investment, this manipulation in the investment market. It's a shame. We all know how important strength training is for long-term health, but it can be hard to know where to start. I was in the same spot a year ago. You want to make sure you're doing exercises right, avoiding injury, and getting results. But it's easy to feel lost without a plan. That's when I found On Target Fitness. At On Target, you get a custom strength program, personalized attention in a small group setting, and the nutrition coaching you need for real lasting change. And the year I've been working out there, I've gotten stronger, more mobile, and more confident. My form has improved, and even something as simple as walking feels better. The group energy keeps me motivated, and every workout is fun. On Target just opened a new location in Kingston. Now you've got even more options to experience their amazing approach. If you're ready for lasting change, head to www.ontargetfit.com and schedule your session today.
And here's the other thing: it's like there's a word of mouth PR on that, right? Where my frustration gets carried on to another, and another and another. And then eventually they're like, why bother, right? Why bother treating? Let's just wait for the government to just tell us what to give, right? What you saw during the pandemic was not the fault of the doctors, like everybody was like, oh, these doctors, they're like, they didn't take the oath, etc. But no, that's not true. Nobody supported these doctors, right? Think about who supported my clinical trials. No one. I mean, maybe like four people invested and donated some money. I could probably on one hand, I could, tell you people.
Hmm.
So, when you have there's an expectation of physicians. And the thing is, if you don't support them when they speak, if you don't support them when they're doing the research, how are they going to help you? You're asking too much of a physician. And at the end of the day, what's happening is, listen, we saw my friend Jackie Stone who killed herself, right? We saw, people dying, doctors dying on the front line from pure exhaustion. Suicide rate is high in physician, and then you see the doctors quitting, and that's the sad part. How many good doctors quit the NIH, quit the FDA during the pandemic? We needed those voices. We needed those people to stand up. And it's not everybody that has a tough skin. Most people get affected. Like me, I don't care. You want to talk shit about me? That's why I wrote the book. Let's talk shit. You know what I mean? Sell my book. You know what I mean? So every time they like annoy me and talk shit about me, I'm like, don't forget to buy the book. Barnes and Nobles, Amazon. And that pisses them off even more because it's like, oh wait, I'm helping her with her business. It's like, yeah, the more you attack me, the more you talk shit about me, the more you put me on stage. The more you put me on stage, the more I succeed. So guess what? Stop talking shit. Let me do my research peacefully in my lab. I will go back to being a hermit and not talk. Or let's go to court. Let's go speak at the Senate. Let's go speak on Congress. Let me start the shit show. And I'll expose everything. But you know what? I'm trying to tame myself right now because I know the hurricane that I am. I know who I am. I know who I am. I've seen myself during fires. I've seen myself during COVID. I know who I am. I'm the girl that juggles 25 things at the same time. Now, I may make mistakes, but the thing is, my brain works at a capacity that is unbelievable. And I want to use that brain capacity to help mankind. I don't want to use that brain capacity to say, you know what, I'm vengeful. I'm going to go after this person. I'm going to go to court. I'm going to sue this person. Look, a perfect example, Facebook. Okay. Zuckerberg, he basically announced he interfered with research. He interfered with my research. We couldn't advertise our clinical trials. Now, Sabine Hazan could say, hey, there's a good opportunity to make money by attacking, Zuckerberg. But why would I? It doesn't help my research. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to call Zuckerberg and say, hey, maybe you should start donating for research and do the right thing, right? Change that vengeful, going after a person to bring goodness and help autism and see if familial FMT has a role. Hey, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe familial FMT, maybe the product is better. Maybe an independent donor is better than familial FMT. But we've got to see that, right? And I'm the first one. If I'm wrong about something, I'll be the first one to say I'm wrong. I created a patent with hydroxychloroquine, Z-Pak, vitamin C, D, and zinc. They wanted to buy that patent. I didn't want to sell till I saw the data. When I saw the data that it helped people with like severe COVID, diabetics, old people, that I needed to intercept quickly to kill the virus, that was great. But when I saw the data that it also affected the microbiome, I was like, that's not so great. And how do you differentiate? You're not going to start doing thousands of dollars of stool testing on patients to see who's better and who's not. So I didn't proceed with that. I basically said, you know what? It was great at the time of Delta. It's a great little drug to have in your pocket in desperate times, but there's better. And better means understanding the microbiome. And that's how I roll. right?
Yeah, you are. I just getting to even have a conversation with you is amazing because you embody the what we need in this world is people who are so confident in their ability and in themselves that that if everyone can be who they are, if everyone can do what they're put on this earth to do, for me, I think that it's having these conversations, it's pushing back, it's being able to communicate with people. That's what I think I was put on here for, and I'm going to do everything I can to have these conversations. And you understand your worth to the world, and that's the most dangerous type of person to the establishment, to whatever we want to call it, the what's happening now within our healthcare system. That is the most dangerous thing to it, because you don't care. You're saying, if you want me, come and get me. I'm here, and I'm going to fight back no matter what, because I know that I know what I stand on is true and pure.
And here's what I know: microbes decompose the body when we die, and these microbes are still alive. Okay. What are they doing? Are they coming back in another body? I don't know. But guess what? Life doesn't just stop after death. Okay. There's still life after the body decomposes. There's still microbes rummaging the earth and doing something. So I think it's a mistake to stop that progression, to stop that development of science, to stop the art of medicine. Look, I mean, at the end of the day, for me, it's about asking a question: where do we come from? Where do we go? Right? That's my quest. It's not a quest that's like, about making money. Sure, I need money to do the research. So I'm going to figure out ways, from, selling vitamins to doing whatever, to basically get, consulting, etc., to bring in funds to pay my research. So you need to stay in business, especially because nobody's jumping and saying, oh my God, we're going to put $10 million in Dr. Hazan's lab. And it's okay.
They should.
Okay.
They should.
But it's okay, because guess what? I put in my money. I wanted to see the data. It's more, it's like Madame Curie. She put in all her money in her lifetime to do her discoveries, to write the paper. What's crazy is that, imagine if you retracted the data because her papers had a wrong number in there that was put in, or put in references that were retracted afterwards that you couldn't even anticipate. So that's the sad part about what's going on right now, and the corruption to stop the progress of research. And again, it's all great until you become the patient. How many millions would have Steve Jobs paid to find a cure for his cancer?
Yeah, it's unlimited. He was a billionaire, and he would have given all of it, 100%.
Those are my patients in Malibu. People come to me, they're multimillionaires, and they basically say, find me a clinical trial that you believe that could save me and give me 5 more years. Give me 1 year. Think about some way to keep me alive, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So these people come to me, they've gone to Stanford, they've gone to Mayo, they've gone to Cleveland Clinic, they've gone through the standard of care, and they come to me for looking through the clinical trials, because I've done clinical trials for like decades. And they basically say, which one do you think is the best one that I should enroll in? Okay. And we make that connections. And sometimes the clinical trial works and sometimes it doesn't. But guess what? These people would have spent, I have a guy with kidney cancer. And if I knew what I know now about the microbiome and what I know, it would have been a different story. But unfortunately, he passed away. He would have given all his millions to live 1 more year to see his little kids. He was not an old guy. He was a young guy, lived in Malibu, beautiful house on the beach. He would have paid anything to see his little kids. And here's the thing. I have executives from big companies, software companies, who come to me with their kids with autism, who have tried everything, and they have a normal neurotypical kid. Imagine if that neurotypical kid could change the path of that other kid. So it doesn't really help these executives to basically, stop the science or to challenge to interfere with the research, because it affects their kids. And I know as a parent, nothing is worse than that. So we've got to stop the interference. We've got to stop the interference of medicine, the interference of research. Personally, I don't have any ego, but sometimes I do have an ego, and I try to like catch it and put it and bury it. But I realize it's not about me. It's about the big mission. It's about the mission that I see, which is a disappearing microbiome.
Yeah, I do think that it's I think about gut health a lot just because of my own story. I used to be 280 pounds and was very unhealthy and didn't know how to eat food or anything because I wasn't taught appropriately. And then I started to go to yoga and started to move my body and started to lose some weight and started to eat healthy because of that. And now I'm eating fermented foods. I very much so care about, and I know that it has an effect on me. I know when I eat bad food, and I disrupt or I take antibiotics and I disrupt I can feel it. I can feel what happens. And then I have a little son, and I'm trying to, he's 28 months old, and I'm trying to, provide the best, environment for him to grow up in, and so that his microbiome can flourish. And that's like one thing that, that your research, I was, I know you did a lot of studies with, with bifidobacteria and with specifically to COVID, and that the vaccine kind of, took it away from people entirely. And also breastfeeding mothers who had the vaccine when they had given when they breastfed their babies, the babies were also lacking the bifido in the breast milk. And so does this happen
In the stools, not
in the stool? Excuse me, in the stool after getting the breast milk. Exactly right. The bifido is in the stool. Sorry. And so is there does this happen with all vaccines? Is this happening with all vaccines?
I haven't tested, right? So you need to in order to do that research, you really have to make sure that the diet doesn't change, make sure the kid is the same environment, make sure there's no variables except the vaccine before and after, right?
Oh, okay.
Test. And then you have to test, at least 30 patients to kind of see before and after. But, this needs to be done.
We
right?
have those, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, Dr. Hazan. We have those patient populations, right? Though we have populations who are, because of religious reasons, are never going to get vaccinated, and those same populations also care a lot about their food and what they feed and their consistency in their environment. So if we could just redirect the way that we think and stop caring so much about the investors and what's going to make money and creating, I think it comes down to a lot of, like you've said it a few times during the show, the productization of things, right? Like everything needs to be a product that can be sold opposed to a treatment that can be given that, something curious that, my wife and I come up with. My wife's a clinical pharmacist as well. And, she deals, at the OB, she's with the babies. And so I'm always sending her stuff. And I saw that some mothers were starting, with babies that were not, that did not come out vaginally, that came out via C-section, were treating their babies with some poop smoothies. They were giving their own stool, the mother's stool, right? I know it's really gross, right?
Yeah, that's not something I would promote because, there is such a thing as an aging microbiome, right?
Okay.
And in my opinion, anyways.
So you want baby to baby?
Well, I mean, you want baby to baby, but the problem is is the baby tested properly? Does the baby have vancomycin resistant E. coli? So I definitely don't recommend that. Okay. I think that if you're going to embark on testing, you need to test properly and you need to be guided into how to regrow those microbes without the need of poop, right? Because think about it, it's about the nutrition. It's about the foods you give. It's about the protein. It's about the vitamins. It's about the stuff that increases the microbiome, not necessarily about swapping poop, right?
Yeah, right.
I think poop, should be left for extreme cases, right?
Let me introduce you to Elevate, a premium functional mushroom company focused on supporting your highest potential. They offer a range of powerful supplements crafted from the finest medicinal fungi designed to naturally enhance your well-being. Elevate carries everything from mushroom tinctures, capsules, and teas to their delicious mushroom-infused coffees. All of their products are made with USA-grown mushrooms and contain only wild medicinal mushrooms, no psychoactive compounds. I personally use their focus tincture every day and love their chai tea blend. It's my go-to for a calming yet energizing boost. Elevate's products support mental clarity, immunity, and overall vitality. They ship nationwide, so whether you're new to functional mushrooms or already a fan, Elevate has something for you. Check them out at shopelevatemushrooms.com, where you will find a detailed description of each product and experience the difference for yourself.
Right now, they're doing some studies at Johns Hopkins. They're going to be starting some studies on Parkinson's and fecal transplant. They've done some studies already on Parkinson's and fecal transplant. They're going to do Alzheimer's and fecal transplant. My case, the N of 1, which showed fecal transplant improved Alzheimer's, set us on this path to look at the microbiome improving with Alzheimer's.
With autism as well, right? You had an N of 1 with autism.
As well. So we need to start doing more of those for that population because we've exhausted everything for that population. Now, will there be a time where we can manipulate the microbiome, refloralize, something I like to call refloralization? Refloralization to me is really bringing back the microbes. It's kind of like the Garden of Eden, bringing back that Garden of Eden, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so in order to bring back that Garden of Eden, you've got to remove the weeds. You've got to replant new seeds, new variety of seeds. You've got to make sure you've got life in there, the bees and the birds and all that. So that's how you refloralize. You re-bring back life. You re-bring back the Garden of Eden, right? But if we're constantly, burning on one hand and we're trying to build on another, think about your kid. You're feeding him the right nutrients. You're, doing everything right. You're feeding him the right farm food and everything. But then you step outside in downtown LA with fires, and now you're exposing him to all the smoke of all the plastic that's been decomposed, of all the viruses that are like flowing out there, all the, so you're breathing in all that. So now that perfect microbiome that you accumulated is now exposed to all these toxins, and you're starting all over again, right? And that's the problem, right? The problem is you're good for about this time, and then you're bad again, and then you have to regrow it again, so
that's the same with the treatments, right? Because you'd have to do a treatment, and then a person can, their lifestyle or their disease state can, yep.
And that's the one thing. Like, I'm very careful of who I treat as patients and who I do fecal transplant on and who I don't, okay? Because if the person is a high, producer who's doing like 30 movies a year and he's always on the go and he's flying, jet lagged one month and then jet lagged another month, that person's not steady enough to kind of like grow the microbes. Think about what you did, right? You did yoga, you did meditation, you empowered the microbiome, right? One of the reasons, so that's huge. That's a big component. One of the reasons I don't get excited during a fire or don't get excited during COVID is like, what is that going to do? It's only going to kill my microbiome. I got to focus. I got to put my energy in my brain and use my microbes to get me out of the fire, to get me to survive COVID, right? So ultimately, it becomes, that relationship between the brain and the gut to kind of utilize your gut to focus better and to get out of that. But if you destroy your microbiome, you can't focus. If you're consumed with hate and you want to make money, you're consumed with greed, you're killing your microbiome. You're never going to get out of that. So, so if you're having problems like, growing hair, or your nails are not thick, or you can't lose weight, or you can't focus, well, you got to look back and say, what am I doing in my life? What is killing my gut? And it could be like, toxic people, right? Don't let them be toxic. Turn them off, right? So that's how you so I'm very, very careful of who I do fecal transplant on and who I embark as a patient, because if they're not going to follow my protocol, it's useless. And if they're going to be stressed, it's useless. And I'll tell you, I've seen success, right, with these high rollers where they basically are flying and then they settle down for a month and they're like, oh my God, I have no symptoms. I'm the best that I ever was. And then all of a sudden they deviate from my protocol and they take some like green smoothie that I didn't approve, or some, protein powder that I didn't approve or didn't test. And then all of a sudden they're back to square one and they're like, oh my God, I was doing great up until I tried this protein powder. I'm like, did I say this protein powder was allowed in my protocol? No. So, it's a constant, it is possible. I've seen the possibilities. I've seen the improvement. But sustainability is the key, and
Mm.
engraftment is the key, and implantation is the key, and that's very tough. And resilience is the key. Resilience, developing that resilience is the key. And
And
resilience,
understanding what it is, right? Like understanding for you to be able to do enough tests to understand what that looks like for. And I know we're all different, but it's like kind of what the normal subset or the subnormal subsets would be of what a good, resilient microbiome would be.
yes, yes. It's kind of like knowing what the cow microbiome should be, of a healthy cow, and then being able to kind of like say, okay, well, this is what the cow microbiome should look
Are
like.
we close to that at all? Like through the research that you're doing, or?
I'm working with a bunch of ranchers, so Save the Biff, which is my platform of bifidobacteria, Save Bifidobacteria, has also turned into Save the Beef, BEEF, because listen, we got to protect our animals as well,
Yeah.
protect the
Instead of
microbiome.
pumping them through it's pumping them full of antibiotics. It's like, what do people think?
Oh,
This is
and
what I always thought in school. It's like this meat is going directly into the meat. It's going directly into the meat, and then
yes,
we're eating it, and then
yes,
we're affecting our stomachs because we know what antibiotics do. They completely wipe out the microbiome. They completely wipe out the good stuff, and sometimes we need that because we have some type of bacteria that could
yes,
cause us a lot of harm. Right? That's
right,
yeah.
absolutely.
So yeah, I'm curious about because with there's so many people who like could benefit from this, and like getting us to a point where there's a lot, there's another AI thing. I have a lot of guys who that are creating these blood tests that
Hmm.
are will take qualitative AI a data set, and then they are able to say, like, for instance, we have for people, you might likely know this because it's ulcerative colitis and Crohn's. A drug class that we commonly use to treat that is something called the TNF alpha blocker. And
Right,
so something like Remicade, right? So
right,
Remicade is only and Remicade, and the non-response that we get in Remicade is almost like 80%. It can be very high, sometimes up to like 87%. And so we're only seeing a benefit in 13% of these patients that we have to separate from it's a blood test. I mean, it's a colonoscopy that we have to do. They have to be on the drug for 6 weeks to 8 weeks. Then we have to do a colonoscopy to even see if it's working. Then they've been on this drug for 6 weeks. It's an expensive drug. There's side effects to that drug. There's now I have these colleagues who are working on this company. It's called Ignite Biomedical, and they're going to be able to take a blood test and tell you whether you will be responsive or not to that treatment. That whether you'll be, and I think that is, there's a lot of those out there but this one I do believe in because they do it. They're doing it qualitatively versus quantitatively, and I've done a little bit of research into it, and I'm trying to understand it as best. But my question to you is there a future where like a blood test would be able to help us understand this more and be able to do what you're doing?
I think blood test is going to be one way, and I think stool test is going to be another way. I think stool test is probably the future, if if they let us. But I think mainly because I think you could tell so much from the stool test, right? Because it begins in the gut. Inflammatory bowel disease begins in the gut. What is in the microbiome of Crohn's disease patients? And we actually published that. It's loss of diversity and loss of bifidobacteria first.
Yeah.
So imagine if you could test, put the patient on a biologic, and then test the stool test, the bifidobacteria, to see is that patient's bifidobacterial diversity improving, and therefore are they improving? Then I continue them on that. If they're not, there's other biologics that you can certainly try. But I think we need more diagnostic modalities in medicine rather than
Mm, mm.
therapeutics. We're pushing one treatment after another, but we're never achieving that cure of Crohn's disease. And I know that there's been some amazing work by Dr. Barodi and other doctors that have stepped outside the box of conventional treatment, that have looked into, manipulations of the microbiome or fecal transplant, or even just giving the substances that these microbes are using, right? Or even, pure anti-inflammatories, etc. And that tends to improve these patients, but it needs to have funding and it needs to be reproduced. And unfortunately, the funding needs a business plan behind it. and a business. So it's a difficult concept, and then somewhere along the line is also the art of innovations and the art of medicine. So we can't forget that, and we got to stay focused to protect that at all costs.
Yeah, I think if the focus shifted, right, like instead of talking about 500 billion, which is a for AI mRNA cancer vaccines, which 500 billion is a stupid number anyways, but I bet if somebody gave you $20 million, what you could do at your lab, and what you'd be able to figure out, the amount of stool that you'd be able to process to be able to get us a data set that would help us really understand some different things. And
And
I
to have a data set, right? To have that data set that says this is what a resilient microbiome looks like, this is what Parkinson's looks like, this is what Alzheimer's looks like at the beginning, and to go deep into it to basically help us, because once you have the diagnostic tool, then you can move on to the therapeutics and help the therapeutics,
and
right?
it could be something as simple as vitamin C,
Yeah,
something as simple as vitamin D, right? Like that is how simple it could be, that we just don't understand this stuff to a great enough degree, these disease states, that this bacteria is in the microbiome is very deficient in Parkinson's. We
right.
know that if we combine this biologic with these three vitamins, we know what's going to happen to the bacteria, and then we're going to be able to cure, because that's going up. We now understand that bacteria is associated with an increase in symptom reduction, or maybe even a cure someday.
And I'll tell you, the other thing is, like, let's not forget innovations and the art of medicine again, right? So when I was on the front line of COVID, obviously every patient was different, right? I didn't use the same treatment for everybody. Some people I just gave vitamins, some people I gave ivermectin, doxy, some people I gave, hydroxy, ivermectin, everything, I just threw things in the fire, right? And that's how you learn, right? You learn by trying things, by saying, hey, what about this, what about that? Like, for example, one of the things that I learned, which there was a product in the past that was kind of a bovine immunoglobulins that I had done clinical trials with a pharmaceutical company for Crohn's disease. And the bovine is that bovine is no longer out there. And the company came to me and said, look, you're using that product a lot for Crohn's disease. Do you want to take it over? Do you want to take it on? And I'm like, let me see what it does, right? And I started looking at the microbiome before and after Crohn's patients, and noticed some of my patients with Crohn's helped with this bovine, right? And during COVID, it was kind of fascinating, because I had one of my patients who actually works in the government, and he was like dying, and I gave him everything, but he still had like that lingering long hauler, digestive, couldn't really focus. And I just sent him this powder, and I said, look, I'm giving you this bovine immunoglobulin. It's blood from the cow that's spun around. It's the clear stuff, and we test it, etc. I go, just try this powder, okay? And then all of a sudden he got better. And then, of course, I had his stools before and after. And I started looking at all that's when my interest, right? Because I have all this data, but I don't necessarily sit at my desk and say, let me see what that's doing, right? Because I'm juggling so many, fires. And so what happened was, I looked at that and I'm like, oh my God, it increases the bifidobacteria. It decreases the proteobacteria, decreases the Bacteroides. Maybe this product could be helpful for like Crohn's. Maybe this product could be helpful for, people that have that signature microbiome, right? And you know what? As I'm doing the research, as I'm treating people that have that signature microbiome, I'm seeing improvement with this product, right? So this is something that was just serendipitous, right? It's like finding out, during the pandemic, I took 10,000 every day for 10 days of vitamin C. Okay, I don't recommend that to anybody, especially if you don't have good kidneys, etc., etc. But I took it. I was kind of like, I was on the front line. I was exposed to everyone. I didn't have a mask, as I said earlier. So I tested my microbiome before the pandemic, and then I tested after, right before taking the vitamin C. And my bifidobacteria went from like, I forgot what it was, like 4% to like doubled, right? And And what happened was my scientist said to me, "Did you see your bifidobacteria with vitamin C? What did you do? You doubled it." I go, "I took vitamin C, 10,000 for 10 days." So then I started doing the data, right? I started calling patients and saying, "Hey, do you want to test your stools before and after? I'm giving you some vitamin C." And lo and behold, we published this data that vitamin C increases the bifidobacteria. Now, does it increase it one time? Do you have to keep taking 10,000 vitamin C? Those are the studies that need to continue to be done, right? Do you drop the dosage to do a maintenance? This is what I'm doing. This is my research.
What are we seeing in you? What happened with you? Because I know you're constantly testing your stools.
I'm constantly testing. Well, I basically had to find my maintenance dose in a way. And then, because I was kind of testing back, and I test myself like every week or every month. So I'm a very expensive wife. You can ask my husband. I'm not asking for Gucci shoes or Prada. I'm just asking for stool testing of my poop. So so that's the main reason I want to keep this lab going, to keep it, to keep seeing what I'm seeing. But it's been fascinating. That's how I discovered ivermectin increased the bifidobacteria, because I took ivermectin one time and I saw my bifidobacteria went up. But then I saw it went down, the 24 hours later. So it didn't sustain, right? Because ivermectin is 24 hours, right?
Yeah, the half-life, it's gone. Yep.
And here's the thing, is that why these drugs are helpful, right? Is that why ivermectin is helpful on that second day, on that day? But then 3 days later, you're like, I'm back on the couch again because you've lost. And what's the risk of taking ivermectin long term to the microbiome, to the patient, to the kidneys, to the liver? Those are the studies that need to be done, right? So it's one thing to throw everything on the fire, right? We've all heard, Mel Gibson talk about his experience with those 3 people that survived cancer, right?
Yeah.
But they threw everything on the fire, right? I mean, everything. Here's the question: is that going to sustain the cancer survival? Or once we stop or are these products long-term doing their own problem, causing their own problems on the kidneys, on the liver? And then once you stop those products, are you going to have a relapse of the cancer again? Those are the questions that we need to ask. We need to be, we need to be cautious. And that's the best term to say. Like when I saw my patient with Alzheimer's improved after fecal transplant, Colleen Kelly, who I adore, worked at Brown University. I think she's at Johns Hopkins now. She's basically the one that showed fecal transplant post. 2 patients with C. diff with alopecia areata who basically grew hair, right?
Yep.
And she showed that data, and I'm like, oh my God, you must be excited. This is like a new protocol. You're gonna like cure alopecia areata. And she's like, hold on, Sabine, this is very early. We gotta proceed cautiously. And it's the same thing with me with Alzheimer's. I could have said, oh, let's bring in a protocol. We got to proceed cautiously. We got to do 1, 10, 20, 30, have another lab or another doctor reproduce the data, the same exact protocol. Because remember, if you don't have the protocol that Dr. Barodi or myself are using, you're not going to reach improvement, right? So you got to reproduce the exact same protocol to reproduce the exact same data, because the microbiome is finicky, right? It changes. Everything affects. Some drugs affect the microbiome. Some, drinking 1 glass of wine improves the microbiome, so the data says. But maybe drinking 2 glasses or 3 glasses kills the microbiome. After all, what is alcohol if not a sterilizer of microbes, right? So,
right.
Same thing with vinegar. What is apple cider vinegar? What is vinegar? What is fermentation? How did we get to even create antibiotics? The book Let's Talk Shit is all about that. I forget which page it is that I talk about, the invention of penicillin, right? It happened because some scientists left a petri dish open next to a rotten apple and discovered that the rotten apple, the fungus of the apple, basically helped the bacteria, right?
Yep.
And then it was a woman that basically let a watermelon ferment and then said, hey, here we are. We have penicillin now, right? So these are the things that, get us to notice. It's like serendipitous, right? To me, every serendipitous, is God sending you a gift, right? When I increased my bifidobacteria with ivermectin and I took it, it was God saying, hey, look at the bifidobacteria with ivermectin. And then I went back and I said, what is ivermectin? And then I noticed it's a fermentation of a bacteria. It's a fermented product of a bacteria that lives in the same family as bifidobacteria. So
Ah.
are they sister and brother feeding each other? One is down, the other one feeds it, right? That's how I look at it, very simplistic, right? So these are gifts from God, in my opinion, right? Where you follow a path. And now imagine the path is blocked and you can't get to the next level and you can't study that. Well, you've just interfered with research and the process, right? But if you look at my research, it's a story that's being told, right? Finding COVID in the stools, finding loss of bifidobacteria as a possible marker for long COVID, for COVID, finding that loss of bifidobacteria exists in Crohn's, Lyme, autism, Alzheimer's, invasive cancer, finding that the messenger RNA kills the bifidobacteria, asking the question, are we killing the bifidobacteria? And is that why people are getting COVID after they've had 3 and 4 shots, right? Or is that why they're getting digestive problems? I'll always remember I was at the beef initiative at the farm of Dr. Brooke Miller, and someone from the Department of Agriculture was there. And I gave my talk on the vaccines kills the bifidobacteria. And he came to me and he said, now that I followed your lecture, now that I saw the story, it makes sense why I'm having digestive problems. I never had digestive problems until I got the vaccine. So it's like a light bulb, right? So unfortunately, what happens is the interference with research, the retraction of papers, right,
Mm-hmm.
is waking up people to say, wait a minute, she's probably right. There's something to that. And then they pay attention and they're like, well, she's right. My oxygen was 76%. I took ivermectin and it did increase, right? So it becomes an awakening little by little, and it doesn't become right or left anymore. It becomes we, the people, are realizing we're being sold, something. We're being sold swampland, right?
We're
And then
being sold to swampland, and people are waking up around it. It's
when you see the fires and the mismanagement of the fires, it affected Democrats and Republicans. It's no longer red or blue.
Mhm.
It's really, what's the truth? Why was the reservoir empty? Why were the hydrants not having water? Why is there such a negligence, right? When you see ivermectin is so suppressed, doctors are silenced, censorship is occurring, and you yourself used it and it helped you, you go, wait a minute, something's not right there, right? And I mean, it has helped a lot of people that are in the politics, a lot of doctors that were denying it, etc. And this is how we do it.
And they still can't talk about it, right? Like there's probably so many politicians, Democratic politicians, Republican politicians who have, took the protocol, right? Took the ivermectin protocol because it was working, and they maybe didn't want to get a vaccine or whatever it was. They got the vaccine and then they were going to do the protocol afterwards because they wanted to increase their bifido. They don't come out and talk about that stuff. And so
I
like,
think what's going to happen and what's happening and what you're seeing is those people that are affected are stepping away from investing in stocks, right? They're stepping away from believing so easily, right? They're questioning the data. They're questioning the source. They're questioning who's publishing, who's paying for the publications, who is the journal paid for. You remember, journals hire peer reviewers, okay? Those peer reviewers are not paid. Most of the time, they're doctors that are doing this for the good of science, okay? When a journal goes above the peer reviewers who is not getting paid and says, I'm sorry, peer reviewer, I don't like the fact that you put that paper up. I'm going to retract it as an editor who has no experience in clinical medicine. And now you've just told the peer reviewer you don't really trust their knowledge, right? And here's the problem. My peer reviewers are my peers. They're like people like me that have been on the front line treating COVID. They're analyzing the data. They're criticizing the data. They're coming back to me with questions, right? If I pass all those questions and they say, you know what, we like it, pass it. And then the editor who doesn't even have any clinical training, or the or investors come and bias the editor because they just put in a whole lot of money into the journal. It removes doctors from wanting to do the peer review process. Okay, I have a urologist friend of mine who's an academician, and he heard that my paper was retracted. He reviews about 100 papers every year. He was livid. He's like, I'm no longer reviewing papers. I'm done. They can review their own papers. These journals are making billions. They're not paying the doctors to review the papers. They should pay the doctors a nominal fee, for their time. You pay a lawyer when you hire him to sue for whatever. You should pay a doctor to review the paper.
Incentivize it the right way, yes.
Incentivize the right way. And then you've got to listen to what they're saying. That's it.
Yeah, it's so sad because, like, a lot of stuff that comes from case reports and from papers that are done with small scale clinical trials, that's where real medicine is. Like, you're talking about the art of it. And, like, a lot of people, and especially people that got the same degree as me, like, a lot of times you're getting to it, or you're starting to understand it when it's way later, when we're trying to do big, large, the gold standard, right? That the RTCs, the randomized controlled trials, and it's like that's great, and that is the standard of it is a good thing that we have it. But it's not the only thing, and that was
ultimately it's attaining a cure. Ultimately, it's attaining quality of life for that patient. Okay, and I think doctors are tired, overworked. They want to see quality. They want to say to the patient, here, you're going to take this drug and you're going to get better, right? We've gone away from all that. I think it's very difficult. It's very frustrating for doctors, the practice of medicine these days, because of so many drugs, so many side effects. So what are those drugs doing to each other, interacting with each other? And certainly there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. And we've got to look for that better way.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think the whole thing needs a paradigm shift, because it's like you said, when I learned in school, and you mentioned it earlier, it's a, hey, this is the first line of therapy, this is the second line of therapy, and in some disease states, when you're talking, with mental health, for instance, we're going down. This is the fifth time that I've put you on a different combination of SSRI, SNRI, antipsychotic, anti-anxiety medicine. And this is another, just another thing to throw at you to mess with your microbiome, to mess with, then, which would then mess with the rest of your body,
Right.
mess with and so it's sick, and it's like that's a sick system. That's not a healing health system.
And it's not a system that basically, I know me as a person, as a human being, I don't want to be reminded every day that I'm a patient, right? Every time as a Crohn's patient, you go to the doctor and you get that biologic. I'm not saying the biologic is not the answer, right? It's the answer we have for this moment in time. But surely we could do better to kind of to remove the biologic and improve the microbiome perhaps. And in fact, get the biologic up to a certain point and then stop it so that the person can have a quality of life. So that they're not constantly reminded every 6 weeks that they need to go to the doctor, get a shot, or get their blood tested to see if the medication is working, right? So I think ultimately we would have a lot better mental status in people if we cut down the drugs and got them healthier, healthy gut, healthy mind. We just published we just presenting a paper at the anxiety meeting of the bipolar disorders and the microbiome. So that's coming out soon in April. So yeah, we're showing the data with anxiety and the microbiome, Alzheimer's and the microbiome, so we're basically showing all that data. And, others are reproducing it, so when we published the data of the vaccine affects the microbiome, I was very nervous about that data. We published it as an abstract at the American College of Gastro. It won a research award. But here's the thing, other labs in China published the paper. Other labs in Italy published the paper. So it's what I like in research, which is valid, verified, and reproducible, right? So
Hmm.
if you can reproduce the data, especially in the microbiome world where it's so precise, and you could show what I've shown, which is the killing of bifidobacteria following messenger RNA, then that's the beginning, right? And so that needs to be looked at before we start investing $500 billion on more messenger RNA vaccine technology, which is not necessarily going to be helpful, but could create more harm than good.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at right now, and it's why I felt so emboldened during the pandemic to start speaking up about this stuff because I felt so strongly about it because I felt we're going one way or the other where we could get to a point where we're doing irreparable harm to it wasn't a great system 10 years ago, but at least medicine was being able to be practiced and the art existed. And if you're going to one place in the country, you might be getting a different treatment in another place in the country, and that's good that we can share that. But those systems existed where doctors, through peer review, could share that stuff. And now it's if we go to a place where it's where we're just harming so many people and then we don't have any recourse to even talk about that, like like the COVID thing, there was you said vaccine injured, like you've dealt with a lot of people who went through, that's a real thing that did happen, that people, their life changed because because of this vaccine. And like I said, maybe it was because of the bifido, the decrease in the bifido, and or something else. And it's like there we to ignore all of that and to pretend like it didn't happen, and just that's the wrong way. And then just to dump new technology that we don't really understand and to use it's super scary, and we should be going in the other way of what you're talking about.
And 100%. I mean, when you look at Louis Pasteur and Béchamp, they were arguing. One was terrain health, the other one was pasteurization. When they still had a conversation, right? They were arguing, but they were still collegial and had a conversation. What happened to that? We should have been able to have a discussion. Those of us who didn't agree, certainly we were vocal enough, right? I mean, Peter McCullough, Robert Malone, Pierre Corey. The government should have said, you know what, there's doctors out there that are arguing and insisting that they're seeing something different. We should all come at the table and present our arguments and then come with a solution. But the solution was one agenda, right? One way. Why couldn't it include the other ways? Why couldn't it include, you know what, we're going to treat one group of people, we're going to treat one state, and we're going to vaccinate the rest? Or, why couldn't we do both? Why couldn't we vaccinate and treat, and turning off the fire? We're in 2025 and COVID is still amongst us. I'm still seeing COVID patients.
Yeah, if you had told people straight up and said, "Hey guys, we have this thing called a vaccine for COVID that we're going to try. It could do a lot of harm to you, and we're sorry about that. But I know there's a lot of you who would still be willing to try this. It's called informed consent, and this is a thing that we've had for a long time. So please, just if you want to try this, you can try this, but know that bad things could happen." Millions of people would have lined up, and we could have gotten the data, and then
Yeah,
millions of people wouldn't have lined up, and we would have gotten the data versus that, and we could have compared it. And
100%.
And we still have some of that. We've still been able to compare some of that, but we could have done it in real time. And the early research folk like yourself, who are just head down to the ground, like we don't have solutions for this, so let's find them. Let's find these
I know
solutions.
it's frustrating. It's like you have to say the F bomb because it's so frustrating.
Right. It's so frustrating. And like I said, it's no drama, but it's a place where I want to see the world. I want to see the world go to where we have like this robust conversation where the smartest people in the world, like I said, not me, I can wrangle them together and can get everybody comfortable to have a beautiful conversation. That's my job, and that's what I'm going to do. But getting the smartest people in the room, like yourself, the people who are so confident in what they're doing and what they know, and they're also willing to learn. They're willing to learn and to say, hey, like if the research and the data shows me something else, then we go down that road. We go down that hole. We go down that road.
At the end of the day, whatever people say about me, I lost no one during the pandemic. No one died on my shift.
Yeah, not one, but you were dealing with the sickest of the sick, right?
The charts are here. The FDA saw those charts. The FDA saw the videos of my patients. The FDA has access to all the data of those patients. So guess what? It is what it is. Maybe you should follow success. And how did I do it? Instead of like, let's just line up. So that's my
Yeah, you were really doing medicine, which is really cool. From the stories that I've heard and following you. You had some of these sickest people who were otherwise they were they were going into a hospital and likely going to be intubated. That was the sickness level you were dealing with. People overweight, comorbidities like crazy,
and they didn't want to go to the
and did it
hospital. That's the reality. They didn't want to
because
go
they
to the
saw.
hospital. So I left with the sickest of the sickest. But here's the thing, right? At the end of the day, like you said, it's informed consent, right? I'm not opposed to, you want to spend 500 billion on messenger RNA, go for it. You want to people are going to line up to vaccinate, fine, give them informed consent, let them. Freedom of choice. Freedom of choice. Just don't come to my office and tell me that I can't practice medicine unless I get a shot or I line up for a blood test. You know what I mean?
I
Don't hesitate and give me my freedom to choose what I want to choose, right? Because otherwise, then it goes for everything. The Jehovah Witness that doesn't want to accept blood, are we going to stop them from, are we going to force blood on them because they
No,
believe that they should have?
but I don't know if the freedom of choice, right? Like I believe in that, yes, 100%. But we also need to fix the systems because there was no choice when you're told certain information and you believe certain information because you're not allowed to study certain things. Like the Vaccine Liability Act, 1986, like that shouldn't exist. There should be liability for vaccine. If certain things happen, those companies should be held liable. So it's it's by
100%. And if they hide things or they hide data that they should have presented to the FDA, like people dying or people having serious adverse events, and the FDA didn't know about it, the FDA needs to have
truth and
to go
reconciliation.
back
Yeah,
to some,
a system where
yeah,
they, yeah.
the emergency is not an excuse on that. Okay, you don't lie about that,
Hmm.
right? So ultimately things have to change. I think if we respect freedom of choice, we're ahead of the game. So I think this presidency is at least doing that. um I think that's what we want to see, and we want to see conversation, and we want to see stopping of retractions of papers that have something to say, even though it's against the narrative, right? And I think we need to hold journals accountable for the retraction of these
Yeah,
papers. In my opinion,
make journals great again.
that would be good. That would be good.
Yeah, no, it really would.
And I'm just going to put my research as a blog or just pay for a front page in the New York Times and just publish my data that way. Because at the end of the day, you know what? Data's out. Data's, however it gets published. Who determines how the word gets out? Maybe I should start a blog, a medical blog on
Yeah.
Twitter
Yeah.
to tell the data of what I found. And maybe that's the new medical form and medical
Pe-
journals, because what's happening right there is not working. These journals are not
People
working.
would listen. People would listen. Do you publish anything? You talked about like earlier your protocols for like what people have, what you're having them eat and stuff. I read a lot, in your book that, a lot of the foods and stuff that people should eat. But like you said, early in the podcast, you said specific protein powder. Is that information available to the public where you would say like, this is the protein powder I would eat or would suggest to my patients?
Yeah, so we're going to start doing that. We're working with a lot of good companies out there that are actually interested in testing the microbiome on patients. And because I say, people want to hire me all the time to influence here and there, and I'm not an influencer. I don't want to be an influencer of companies. I always say I need to see the data. If your product is doing what it's doing, I have no problem in saying that this product, okay, but I need to see the data. So, what I'm doing is there are some products that I trust. I'm going to be publishing on that. Unfortunately, the publications are going to go through the American College of Gastro as usual, because that's the one things that, or maybe we'll do a blog, or maybe we'll do, how there's the consumer report. Maybe
A
there
little
should
bit of
be
both.
like some the Hazen report, Hazen favorite probiotics or the Hazen favorite vitamins that we tested, or, so that's what I do. And, too often, like that study with the drinks that we found 27 drinks, three of them had
Yeah, the
bifidobacteria in
kefir.
there. I did it because I was drinking kefir, and I noticed that the kefir didn't have bifidobacteria. My kefir didn't have bifidobacteria, and I'm like, I wonder how many others don't have bifidobacteria, and found out that only three of them had bifidobacteria. Well, here's what I did with that study. It made the companies aware that somebody's watching, right? So I didn't really, set myself out to tell the companies who are the companies, because here's the problem. We don't live in a normal world, right? And I don't want to I remember at the beginning of the company, at the beginning of the pandemic, I supported a certain raw milk farm. Literally a month after I supported the farm burned to the ground. And I'm like, oh my God, I wonder if like I had something to do with that, because my mind goes there, right? And so what happens is I don't want to put any companies in jeopardy or anything like that. What I do want to do is basically say, hey, I'm watching, somebody's watching, my patients are watching, right? So when my patients come in and they're on probiotics, I don't tell them to stop the probiotics. I say, no, test on the probiotics. Let's see what that probiotics is doing. When I find zero bifidobacteria in that patient who's on that probiotics, I'm like, well, clearly that probiotic is not doing anything. Do you want to test the probiotics? And then we test the probiotic, and we notice there's no bifidobacteria in the probiotics. So, this is the kind people, and then guess what? These people start talking, word of mouth. They go to their friend because they become the scientists, they become the researchers with their own body. What I did with Progenibiome was for me first, right? I tested my microbiome. I looked for COVID in my stools. I looked for my bifidobacteria level. I tested my kefir. I tested to see if it was improving my bifidobacteria. I became the scientist for my body, right? More people need to embark on that journey to be their own detectives, right? And that's what we do. That's what I do with my patients. And on the whole, they get an awakening. They get to see, oh my God, I spent $300 on this probiotics, and it doesn't even have bifidobacteria in there. Now, could it be that it was during the factory, the processing? Maybe that batch didn't have it. Maybe. But certainly, for that patient who didn't improve and took that $300 probiotic, that didn't do very good for him. And he told his friends, who told their friends, etc., etc. The guy that basically took the protein powder is an influencer, right? So, when he tells his friends, he tells his network, and then next thing you know, that protein powder is garbage. So Sabine Hazen doesn't need to be the person that tells. Sabine Hazen just needs to help people to improve their gut health, and then through improving their gut health, then they learn and they become their own detective. And that's what we've become, right? Because we've realized we've become our own firemen, we've become our own, doctors. We've taken owner this pandemic. What it did to me is I took ownership of my body, and I said, look, I know that if I'm eating this junk food, I'm responsible for eating that junk food, and I know what it's going to do to my
Yeah.
gut. I know if I'm drinking those 2 glasses of wine, I know what it's going to do to my gut. So I'm responsible to make the decision, and basically I develop the discipline or I don't develop the discipline, right? But I think that's what people have done. People have like started educating themselves. They started learning. They started seeing, how do we garden? How do we have like, maybe set up towers in their homes with gardening? How do we, maybe have some beehives in our backyard, right? Because of the importance of bees in the
And the
planet,
importance
right?
of honey in your
And
gut.
so, and the importance of honey, we're actually coming out with that data with honey. It's going to be
Oh,
interesting.
please share it. Please keep me focused. I've been telling my folks to take honey forever because of the positive effects that it's had on me of cutting out white sugar and replacing it with a beautiful natural sugar.
Oh, 100%. So natural sugars are very important. So so basically we're coming out with that data, right? What is it doing? What is it not doing? Um, people, at the end of the day, it's all research. We're learning every day. And we're going to try to publish, support us, support the foundation, Microbiome Research Foundation, because that's how we get funding, and then support the products that we support because that's how we get funding. You know, I've yet to make a penny since the pandemic. And unfortunately, I spent all my money and I dump it back in research. It hurts me that these papers were retracted because it was thousands of dollars. But I know they're still out there. People are seeing them, and I'm going to look at them as like my gold medal of, if you don't have enemies, then you're not doing some. If you, Winston Churchill said, if you have enemies, it means you're doing something right. So I'm going to say I'm doing something right, and I'm going to keep doing something right. And I'm going to be talking shit, and I'm going to be, letting the shit, all over, because we need to understand the microbiome, and because, research should not be interfered with.
Yeah, that sounds great. And any way that I can help you, I have a decent audience over here in the Northeast, and that's one thing is like there's probably someone who's doing some of the work out here, that is similar to you, but maybe probably not. So that's why it would be good for you to come out with the Hazan report. Or if you don't want to, do it, we'll call it the Dr. BeeWell report. You can funnel the information to me. I'll take the liability. But just to
maybe we'll do the Dr. BeeWell and Hazan reports.
I love it. I love it because I think that having the information from people who are actually doing the tests, that they're second to none to that. And I think that's gonna be a great thing. I'm super excited about the honey research that you guys have coming out and all the other stuff that you have coming out about the autism and the Parkinson's, and just to continue down the bifidobacteria, the path here.
And by the way, we're inviting all doctors to join. I train doctors on what I learn. I teach them what I learn. We embark in the research together, and that's what's amazing, because then, we find things together. The doctor that's on the Chris Cuomo show, Robin Rose, works with me, works with ProgenaBiome, and we've been able to discover a lot of fascinating things together. So, we want more doctors. We have so many doctors in Beverly Hills that are, seeing the data. They're taking care of high influential patients. And we are seeing the data together. It's beautiful to come to the table. And then they bring their ideas of their data that they read. I work with so many doctors. We have so many doctors that are part of us. This mission is really to take back medicine, to bring it back to the way it should be, and a communication between doctors. I'm working with a doctor in an academic center looking at lovastatin and the microbiome. I'm looking at Manuka honey with another academic doctor and the microbiome. So, that's the way it is. And, probably I'll get my name out of the publication. So, because it seems like I've got this big dartboard on me, but at least get the publications out there. I'll get my name out there, and I'll probably just put my husband's in there, or just keep ProgenaBiome independently funding the research and put other people's names on the papers, which probably would bring it to a different level. So listen, we're here to learn, and at the end of the day, it's all research. Until we figure out how to live to 150 years old, it's all research.
It's all research. That's it. And we will do that. I think that we're going to be doing that through some of your work. I think I've taken up enough of your time here today. I've really appreciated you, coming on this coming on this podcast with me today and sharing your experience and honestly your hope and your vision for the future. I needed this today. I needed this today to hear that, to be the best a clinician, I still practice a little bit, to be the best I can and just the best person that I can be doing this show. And please, to my guests, please, go to ProgenaBiome, follow Dr. Hazan, on Twitter, on X. She's amazing. She's a really, really, person who, like I said, we know she's based in her research, and she's gonna, she's definitely gonna change the world, and I'm gonna be here for it. So thank you so much for coming on today, Dr. Hazan.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.